Okay, today I'm going to take a look at an old SBI game. It's part of their Moments in Conflict series. It's number 3. It's called Bundeswehr, Northern Germany, late 1970s. It is designed by one of the few women that I know of that have designed any war games, Virginia Mulholland. It was developed by Mark Herman and James F. Dunnigan, and the physical systems and graphics are by Redmond A. Simonson. It is part of the Modern Battles 2 Quadra game series. I think there were 8 of them. This one here, the standard rules are for Bundeswehr, Yugoslavia, Jerusalem, and DMZ. They're pretty much standard SBI Quadra game rules from 1977 era. And I will be going over the components of the system, sequence of play. We'll touch on some of the rules on movement, combat, special rules for the scenarios, discuss the scenario a little bit, and probably push a few counters around, but I'm not going to do a complete replay or that type of thing because I never seem to be able to finish them, and they take up an awful lot of time, which I have very little of these days. So we're just going to kind of look at it, examine it a little bit, and that's pretty much the goal that I have for this little project at the moment. So I'm going to get together here, get some of this done, put together, and we're going to go over the game. Here we have a look at the map. It's printed on map paper, as was common for SBI at the time. Graphics are not up to the usual SBI standards. However, they are quite usable and for the most part clearly defined. Some of the terrain doesn't quite pop out like some more modern designs, or even some of their more modern designs. Modern as it was back in the late 70s and 80s. However, it's clear enough to use and not terribly confusing once you understand the different types of terrain. I think some of the greens, which represent forests, marsh, mixed terrain, could have been delineated a little better. However, we have what we have here, circa 1977. I'll give you a little bit more of a close-up map, or a close-up look at the map, to show you a little bit more about what I'm talking about. This is a close-up of the map. It's about the best I'm going to get right now. I'm covering the overhead light, otherwise we'll get the nuclear glare effect. See, like that. The game does have nuclear weapons in it. However, this is not one of them. We have a river, which is clearly delineated by the blue line. We also have what is marsh. We have forest. We have, in this hex is a town hex. These two are city hexes. We also have, is that, yeah, that's marsh. This is mixed terrain over here. You can tell that the color differentiation is not the best. So sometimes you have to stop and think just what kind of terrain that you're moving into. However, it serves its purpose and it's fully playable. And I will now go ahead and show you some of the counters and describe the different graphics and alphanumeric numbers and letters found on them. This is a typical counter found in the game. This one happens to be a Soviet counter. The game is remarkable, I guess, for not having any US units in a NATO Warsaw Pact game. There are German units, a small British contingent, I guess I should call them West German units, a small British contingent, and the rest are Soviet Warsaw Pact units. They're not broken down by Pact type. They're just pretty much all Warsaw Pact. Anyway, this is your typical artillery unit. They're half-inch, printed on a matte cardboard stock and paper. We have, of course, we have the artillery symbol, standard for NATO symbology. Over here we have the unit's bombardment strength. Here we have its basically defensive fire or final protective fire is what they call it in the rules strength. It has a range of 11, and you can use both of these strengths at 11 hexes. By itself, it has a defense strength of 1. The N indicates that it is nuclear capable, and the number on the far right is its movement factor, allowance, whatever. This is another typical unit. You'll notice that this system uses the untried units system from, say, like Panzer Group Guderian, I believe, and several others that SBI, I guess you want to call it, pioneered or developed. The U, of course, stands for the fact that the unit is untried. Let's see if I can get any closer here. The unit is untried, and it has a movement point allowance of 12. It is a mechanized infantry unit, or motor rifle, I guess the Soviets would have called it back then. It's battalion sized. Most of the units in this game are battery or battalion sized. The concept of untried units is, obviously, you do not know what its actual combat strengths are until it first enters combat. This is supposed to reflect or represent an unknown quality of units that have not been in combat. You don't have full information or knowledge of how that unit will perform in combat until it enters an enemy zone of control and declares combat. Then you will flip it over and find out what its attack, defense, strength, and movement allowance is. Some of them can be very poor, some of them can be fairly good-sized units, and you basically have to make do with what you have. So we're going to go through, or now I'm going to go through the basic sequence of play. We've covered most of the components. The game comes with a terrain effects chart and a terrain key. Let's see if I can show those without hosing things up too bad, or knocking over my camera, or any other such calamity. I don't know how well this will focus. I really need to pull it back, but you've got different charts and tables, the terrain key, and its effects. We have the nuclear weapon ground support table. Well, actually, that's for the DMZ game. Ground support tables look like they're both for the DMZ game. Well, anyway, and we have the nuclear weapons chart, which I guess would be helpful if I turned it towards in a readable way. Anyway, I'm not going to get too excited about that. Nuclear weapons. We have two types of combat tables, an active combat results table, and we have a mobile combat results table. As you might expect, the mobile combat results table has less eliminations, more retreats. The active combat table has more eliminations and less retreats. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the sequence of play a little bit, and we'll carry on from there. The game comes with two rule sets. The first one is the standard rules, which apply to all games in the Modern Battles 2 quad. There is also exclusive rules for just this particular game, Bundeswehr, or Bundeswehr, however you want to pronounce it. And these are photocopies of the rules, since my rule book is basically falling apart. Even though I've only played the game twice, it's seen better days. So I went ahead and made copies, and I'm going to use those to keep the game from my rules from falling apart even further. The rules are pretty much standard case type rules for SBI. They cover the game equipment and the nomenclature on the various units, your parts inventory, that type of stuff. We have a sequence of play, which I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the camera down low enough to have any kind of quality with that. You can tell this is pure amateur hour here. See if I can get back into focus here or not. I love autofocus. Come on here. Come on. Aha, there we go. Miracle of technology. The sequence of play is pretty simple, extremely formal. It's an I go, you go kind of a thing. The game turns divided up into first player turn and second player turn. The player whose player turn is currently in progress is turn and phasing player, and stuff like that. We have a special weapons interface, which is used only in this game, and it is to implement the nuclear weapons rules. I know I can read. Then we have, in a more detailed outline, we have the first player turn again, or as I stated, which consists of a movement phase and a combat phase, which should be fairly self-explanatory. And then we have basically the same thing for the second player. And then we have a game turn record phase. I'm going to go ahead and reposition the camera and just read off some of the basic game systems and stuff like that, because it'll be much easier than just trying to mess with the camera and all that kind of thing. So we have the movement phase, which is pretty standard. There's no stacking. Can't enter an enemy hex, of course. Must stop upon entering the enemy zone of control. All units exert an enemy. All units exert a zone of control. The 6 hexes surrounding the friendly unit or enemy unit. They're all pretty standard. They stop movement, force combat. Combat uses a differential system, and like I said, you can pick either the active or the mobile combat results table. However, for that turn, you have to use one or the other for all attacks. You can't switch between one attack or the other. You can't change tables from one attack to the other. All units have to attack as with 1 combat strength. All defenders defend with 1 combat strength. You can make diversionary or soak-off attacks. The combat results have, let's see, defender retreats 1, 2, 3, or 4 hexes, or the attacker can retreat 1 hex. Both the attacker and defender must retreat 1 hex. You can have an attacker eliminated, a defender eliminated, and an exchange. In an exchange, all defending units are eliminated first, then an equal or greater number of attacking strength points are lost. So these are all at printed defense strengths. Then we have the standard retreat rules. Can't retreat into an enemy zone of control. Can't retreat through an enemy unit, of course. I think you can retreat through friendly units. Yes. And it has displacement where if a unit has to retreat, it through a friendly unit, it forces the friendly unit back, and it takes the retreating unit, then occupies the friendly unit space. I've never understood that rule. It seems to me like it should just continue to retreat past a friendly unit. However, this has been a standard rule throughout gaming history, so I guess that something we have to deal with. I'll just kind of move things around just a little bit. Give you a little bit something different to look at. It's actually in focus. Anyway, we have artillery, which can use ranged attacks. It can do a barrage attack, pretty much like the old blue and gray quad. It fire out a barrage attack equal to its range. It can also do a combined attack. It can attack alone or with other units, or with ground support, which basically comes from air power. If it's by itself, it uses its own defense strength. It also has a final protective fire, which is basically it can use that middle number to support a defense within its range. And that's kind of it for that. We have air power, which is you get air points. Each air point is equal to, they're called ground support points. They can be used as barrage or final protective fire. And like I was going to say, one ground support point equals one artillery string point. And you can assign your ground support points however you want to. So that's pretty much the basic rules. Nothing too outstanding or surprising. Then we have the exclusive rules. Let's look at this over here for fun. Try to get away from that glare. I'll just bypass it. I don't know if this is in focus or not, but if you get bored of just looking at a static shot, I guess you can turn on the TV or something. Anyway, like I said, we have the concept of untried units. There's also river crossings in which the river bridges, any hex that has a bridge over it, somewhere behind the solar flare, there is a bridge here across this river, right there. Where's my pointer at? Here it is. These bridges are wired to blow. If a Soviet unit enters a hex adjacent to that, you have a chance to blow up the bridge, and you cannot cross these rivers. And there's probably, I don't know, eight bridges, something like that. Maybe a few more, a few less, whatever. So I don't know what happens if they all get blown. Statistically, I don't think that's going to happen because it's a 50-50 chance per bridge, but if you rolled incredibly good as a defender, that's pretty much the game, because the Soviets have no bridging capability. Let's see, we have reinforcements, pretty much the same rules for reinforcements as in most games. Spare your eyes here a little bit from the glare, I guess. Okay, nothing exciting there. And the optional rule is nuclear weapons. The use of this rule will drastically alter the play balance of the scenarios. Anyway, you get to plot them, and then they detonate, and units within a certain range, suffer adverse conditions and stuff like that. Then we have a NATO counterattack, in which the NATO player gets to use the active combat table for 2 consecutive game turns, and they must be consecutive. He does not have the option to withhold this use of the active table from game turn to game turn. Let's see. There's no restrictions on how many times the Soviet player may use the active combat results table throughout the game. The NATO player, like I said, on the other hand, may use the active table only twice per game. So I guess he has to use the mobile combat results table. We do have Soviet air supremacy on the first 6 turns of the first scenario. And we have die roll modifications, which adjusts how many support points you get, air points, whatever. I do not know. He seems to get less air points as the game progresses, naturally. I don't think NATO gets any air points in the time frame of this game. Let's see, what do we have? We have three scenarios. Let me double check here. Yes, we have 3 scenarios. We have the Soviet invasion, we have NATO counterattack, and then we have Soviet assault. I'm going to be playing the NATO... No, I'm not going to be playing that one. What am I going to be playing? NATO counterattack. I think so, yes. So that's pretty much the game in a nutshell. It's pretty simple for the most part. Like I say, it uses kind of a advanced version of Napoleon at Waterloo or that type of a thing, blue and gray. It fits into that same category, I guess, of playable simulations, I guess. Playability over simulation. It's an old game, like I say, dates back to the Cold War, when everybody was freaking out about the Soviets invading. Never came to pass, obviously, but who knows what the future holds. Frankly, I think we have to worry more about disease-carrying mosquitoes than we have to worry about nuclear annihilation, but that's just my opinion. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and maybe give you a few examples of play just for the fun of it, and then I'm going to go ahead and play the game, but I probably will not do much in the way of filming it or anything like that. Pretty much this is just kind of an overview of the game for public consumption. And with that, I will go ahead and set up some examples of play. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay, I assume that most everybody understands basic war game movement, but for those of you who may not, I'm going to just demonstrate real quick how that works. We're going to have a Soviet mechanized or motor rifle battalion move down this road until it, well, we're just going to go ahead and I'm just going to show you an example of movement. I'm not going to try and theorize or explain a whole lot of stuff other than just the basic systems. Okay, each unit has a movement allowance. On this unit, it's a 12. Moving along the road, there is no, oh, how do I put it? There's no difference in unit type as far as movement allowances go or terrain effects. All units use the same terrain effects table, there is no differentiation, I guess, between armor or non-armor, that type of thing, mechanized, whatever. To move down the road, it's going to cost you half a movement point. Now, if it could continue down the road indefinitely, it could move, what, 24 hexes? I'm not going to move it 24 hexes, but that's what it theoretically could move, given the proper terrain and lack of enemy units and such. Let's ignore the road for the moment and just pretend that it's clear, and we're just going to go ahead and each clear hex only costs 1 movement point. So if I wanted to move it, let's say off-road or whatever, I could go 1, 2, 3, and then 4, where it would have to stop, not only because of the river, but because of the zone of control, which consists of this hex, this hex, this hex, this hex, this hex, and this hex around the West German armor unit. See if I can get a little clearer picture here, a little closer. All right, bravo. So that's basically the concept of movement. If you wanted to move through terrain, this terrain here being mixed terrain, and mixed terrain is going to cost an extra, that's actually only going to cost 1 movement point. So you could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, getting on the road. It's going to cost you half a movement point on the road, 7.5 movement points. There is no cost to enter an enemy zone of control. That's pretty much how movement works. This would also now cause a combat situation between the Soviet motor rifle unit and the West German armor unit. Just kind of a brief look at combat. What happens is, like I said, the Soviets can use either table, mobile or active. The West German could only use mobile, unless, of course, it was part of the 2-turn NATO counterattack where it gets used the assault table or active table. So let's go to the combat phase. There is no artillery support for either side. It's going to be just a straight up contest between the two untried units. Try to focus in on just the action here. See what I can do about this. And that's going to be about the best I can do at the moment. So, at this point, we will now turn the units over. By the way, the West German Panzer is in a town hex, but not a city hex. Yeah, town hex. It's going to get a shift of 2 in its favor on the combat results table, which I'll explain here in a moment. So we'll flip it over to its known side at the moment. It is has an attack strength of 1, defense strength of a 2, and of course the movement allowance is always known. We flip the Soviet unit over, and it's pretty much the same thing. Attack strength of 1, defense of 2. So all things being equal, you would take the attack strength minus the defense strength to get a differential. We'll say we'll use the mobile combat table. We have a -1 differential at the moment, and 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about a 60-some% chance of it, the attacker being forced back. However, the West German armor is in a town, which gives it a 2-column shift in its favor. Let's see what I can do here. Which one is a mobile? We're going to use mobile, I guess it is. And that would be this one. That would be active. There we go. This looks better if I can just, figure out what's what. So I'm going to get down here where it's in focus. I took off autofocus because it just drives me nuts. The basic one would be here, the basic column, 1 minus 2. But due to the town, the attack will be resolved on the -4, -3 column. And you can see right there that it is going to basically be the attacker is going to be forced back no matter what. So, but he still has to attack because he is in the enemy zone of control, the West German zone of control, and the Soviet unit must attack even if the odds are, not in his favor. And like I say, he's in a town, so we're going to shift 2 over. No matter what die roll I roll on the -4, -3 table, or -3, -4, it's going to be an attacker, basically retreat of 1 hex. So I don't even have to roll the die. I just know he's going to have to retreat. So he'll retreat back along this road. I don't know, I'll have to double check here, if the defender can advance or not. Some games allow it, some games don't. See here for a minute. Check for a minute. We don't have displacement. Advance after combat. Whenever an enemy unit is forced to retreat or is eliminated as a result of combat, it will leave a path of vacant hexes behind it called the path of retreat or retreat path. Any or all friendly victorious units which participated in the combat and were adjacent to the retreated unit are allowed to advance along this enemy path of retreat. They ignore zones of control and so on. I don't see where it specifies it has to be the attacker or the original attacker or defender, so I'm assuming that both sides are equally allowed to advance after combat, depending upon the combat results. So that pretty much takes care of movement and combat. Like I said, there's um, some more detail and stuff like that. Let's look at this. Let's say that the Soviet unit had some artillery to support it. We're going to put the main motor rifle unit back up here. We flipped them over, and that's what we revealed. We now have a Soviet artillery unit. It has a broad strength of 5. Its final protective fire is only a 1, so it's not going to be much used in defense. In fact, I think this unit might be a rocket artillery, considering its range and everything. Anyway, if we have the combat, we figure out the combat factors and what am I trying to say? If we process the combat procedure, we will now have basically the same thing. Attack of 1 versus a defense of 2 makes it a -1. However, we can now add, because it's within 9 hexes, we can now add the barrage strength, which can be used either separately or combined with an attack. We can use a barrage strength of 5, and we'll just add that to the 1, making it basically a 6. Now we have a 6 minus 2, or plus 4, and we will resolve combat at the moment on the plus 4 table of the mobile combat results table. Yeah, I know, it's kind of all redundant. Plus 4, here we go. So at the moment, we're way over here on the plus 4 table. Is that right? Yes, 6 minus 2. However, they are in town, which will shift it back to the plus 1 table. Here we have several different types of results, depending upon the die roll. We have both retreat, attacker retreat, or the defender can retreat 1 or 2. I'll go ahead and roll the die. There are no other support points. We get a 1. On the, what was it, plus 1 table, a 1 is a D2. So now the defender is forced to retreat 2 hexes. Number of hexes in accordance with the retreat rules. I'm pretty sure he can retreat across the bridge. I'll have to double check that, of course. You know, I don't have these rules memorized by any chance. It's not prohibited terrain and that kind of a thing. It doesn't fall into enemy zones of control, stuff like that. So, how to retreat? You can leave. The only way to leave an enemy zone of control, by the way, is through retreating or eliminating of the defending unit or attacking unit, whatever. Vacant hexes, friendly occupied. May not cross the prohibited hex side. And there is a bridge there, so that negates the prohibited hex side penalty, because bridges act pretty much the same as a road, whatever. So, the West German armor unit is going to have to retreat 2 hexes. This is where the bridge is, so he's going to have to retreat here as his first hex of his path of retreat. He has to end up 2 hexes away from the hex he first occupied during combat. So I guess he would just go ahead and retreat on down the road. He'll still exert a zone of control around here, forcing the Soviet unit to stop normally there. However, with the advance after combat, he can move there anyway, because he has to follow the retreat, and I'm talking about the Soviet unit. So he would move here, occupy this hex, and then he would move here. Let me see if retreat is mandatory that you have to follow. I don't think it is. I think if you do advance, I'll try to get my terms right here. If you do advance after combat, you have to follow the path of retreat, but I don't think you have to follow the entire path on the advance after combat. Must be exercised immediately before any other combat resolution. Units are never forced to advance after combat. After advancing, units may neither attack nor be attacked in that phase, even if their advance places them next to an enemy unit. Let's see here. That's all retreating. Doesn't have to. Let me see here. Let's go back to the retreat path real quick. I don't see advancing victorious units may cease advancing at any hex along the path of retreat. So, if, for instance, this unit did not want to cross the bridge but wanted to occupy the town, he could stop there. However, it would probably be in his best interest if he did cross the bridge of the advance next to the defending unit or whatever. However, I think and I know that whenever the first Soviet unit moves adjacent to a bridge hex side, regardless of how it got there, combat, advance, retreat, normal movement, you get to see if you can demolish the bridge. So, for an example, let's try bridge demolition. The NATO player will roll a die. On a 1, 2, or 3, he'll demolish the bridge. So it's basically a 50-50 here. I rolled a 1. The bridge is demolished, so he will not be able to advance any further after combat, nor basically for the rest of the game. There is no bridge building, there is no bridge repair in the course of this game, which I think is kind of antiquated. You would think that attacking forces would bring their own bridging equipment with them, especially if they know they're going to be advancing across terrain which contains impassable rivers, but that's neither here nor there. So that's basically an example of movement, combat, barrage, advance, and retreat. So other than that, there's not much more I can add. The game is fairly simple, and I know I had to look up rules several times, but you know, it's pretty simple compared to other games. So with that, I'm going to pretty much finish my look at this game, and I'll probably go ahead and play out the game for my benefit and maybe tell you what happened. By the way, I have added, sorry for the glare, I've added some colored transparent discs just to mark victory point objectives for the Soviet player. So I don't like to Euroize my games by adding silly little blocks and Euro component stuff, but in this case I do see a positive use for such things. I prefer just a victory point counter of some sort, but you know, whatever. I don't feel like making my own at the moment, so we'll go with some Euro type stuff. Not much into blocks and plastic meeples and stuff like that, but that's just my own personal feelings. To each his own, and if you like them, that's great. So, and no, I don't use those little grout markers or whatever they are, the little X's that people use to indicate certain status of their units and stuff. I see where they have a good use, good purpose, but it's not for me. So the little grout tile spacers, I guess is what you would call them, little tile spacers. And so with that little rant, I guess I will leave you Do something about that glare. I will leave you with well, those thoughts and stuff. Anyway, um, until next time, happy gaming